Let me read the question for you very quickly, just to give you a general understanding, and then we'll delve into the details. It says, the bar chart below shows the percentage of people owning different types of vehicles by fuel type in a European country. The second part, as always, is quite redundant. It's something we've seen before. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so remember step 1, understanding. I'm going to walk you through this very quickly, okay? I'm going to be a little bit more, quick in going over what you need to pay attention to because we've done this before. So remember, understanding. Step 1, look at the question, identify the MP. The bar chart below is the subject, shows is the verb, the percentage of people owning different types of vehicles by fuel type in a European country. European country? No, I don't think we can say 30% of European country. Fuel type? 30% of like diesel fuel cars? No, that's not it. Different percentages of people. So these correspond to the percentage of people who own these types of charts. So people is the MP core. Step 2, look at the features. The vertical axis shows the percentage of people. Remember? So people was the MP. The vertical axis shows the percentage of people. The horizontal axis, what does it show? Remember from a few lessons ago, the horizontal axis usually shows the different categories of the data. In this case, we have 6 categories of cars, vans, hatchbacks, sedans, SUVs, minivans, and trucks. And then we also have a distinction of these types of cars by fuel type. So we have electric, gas, and diesel, right? For each category. Okay, so we've identified what is represented by the vertical axis, the horizontal axis, the scale. So it's 5, 10, 15, 20. So it's increasing by 5 percentage points each case. And what about key? Well, it says percentage of vehicle ownership by fuel source and vehicle type 1. So yeah, that's also a repetition of what was in the question. I don't think there's anything else. I've checked out everything. Okay, now it's time for me to pick a random part of this chart and describe it in simple terms. I'm going to go with this bar here. You can see it here. So it's hatchback, 20%, and gas. Okay, so hatchback, 20%, and gas. Let's see if we can put this all together. So it's 20% of what? We know it's 20% of people, right? So we could say 20% of people in this European country, okay, owned hatchbacks that were gas-fueled. Is this correct? 20% of all people? No, that's not true. It's actually something else. It's 20% of people who owned hatchbacks drove gas-fueled vehicles. You see, it's 20% of owners in the hatchback category who owned gas-fueled vehicles. This is important. If you miss any part of this or you state it in a different way, chances are you're misrepresenting the data or that you've misunderstood the data entirely. Okay, so these 3 steps, they summarize the first phase, which is understanding. The second phase is planning. Remember? 3 questions. Number 1, how can I divide the information into 2 or 3 parts? Okay, the division's already done for us, right? Remember, the task itself has divided these cars based on the car type and also the fuel type. But we don't want that. We want our own categorization maybe. Or perhaps we're going to look for whichever type of division will yield 2 or 3 paragraphs. Now, if I divide up my paragraphs based on the car type, I will have 6 paragraphs. 1 for vans, 1 for hatchbacks, 1 for sedans, 1 for SUVs, 1 for minivans, and 1 for trucks. I cannot afford to write 6 paragraphs. Remember, 2 or 3. Okay, what other option do I have? Well, what if I go with the other classification? That is, what if I write 3 paragraphs? One for electric, one for gas, and one for diesel vehicles, right? Diesel fueled vehicles. This one works beautifully. So if you have in a bar chart a type of classification which will automatically result in 2 or 3 parts, that's always your best bet. But what if we had like 5 types of cars, as you can see here, and we had like 5 sources of energy? I don't know what those other sources of energy would be, but let's say for the sake of argument. What am I going to do now? Well, now I have to go with one of these types of division and then bundle or group them together. For example, if I decide to go with the car types, maybe I can put vans, minivans, trucks together, and then put hatchback, sedan, and SUV together. And the rationale would be, household versus, cars that one would own as for example, as a business, right? So that's my rationale. Or if I have 5 fuel types, maybe I could divide them based on whether they are fossil fuels or they are alternative fuels, right? So I could divide up the data into 2 parts based on the type of fuel, not by individual category, but bundling them into, let's say, alternative versus, fossil fuel sources of energy. And so with that, I have decided how many paragraphs I'm going to write. In this case, 3 paragraphs. Remember, electric, gas, diesel, that's pretty straightforward. Now, the next question is, how can I summarize each of these into 2 or 3 sentences? If I'm not summarizing, like let's say I'm writing a report that will describe everything here, how many sentences am I going to write for electric? Well, I have electric vans, electric hatchbacks, electric sedans, electric SUVs, electric minivans, and electric trucks. I cannot write 6 sentences. So what am I going to do instead? Well, in the electric category, I'm only going to mention the highest and the lowest percentage, right? So I can say the highest percentage of electric cars owned were in the sedan category, right? And the smallest percentage of electric vehicles belonged to the van category. Do you see what I just did there? I didn't mention all of the categories and their numbers. For each category, I focused on the highest, the lowest, perhaps the ones that are similar, or anything that has a significant proportion maybe attached to it, right? Like a quarter of, or a fifth of, or something like that. Okay, now we can do the same for gas and also for diesel. And so we have 3 paragraphs, each one made up of 2 or 3 sentences. Which brings me to the final question we need to answer, and that is, how can I find 2 pieces of vital information, or what are 2 key points that I can present in the overview of my response? I'll show you. First of all, look for recurring patterns. Something that you could say and begin your sentence with always. Like always something is the highest, or always something is the lowest, or always X is greater than Y. Let's see if we can find something like this. Well, in the hatchback category, gas-fueled powers are number 1. Sedan, gas-fueled cars are number 1. But it's not true about minivans. It's not true about trucks. It's not true about vans. So, as you can see, it's not something that spans across all of the categories. And I'm actually looking for something that would hold true for all instances. Okay? So what can I find? Well, maybe if I just compare 2 of the categories, I'll find something meaningful. For example, what if I compare electric vehicles to diesel? Okay? It seems that in vans, hatchbacks, right? So we're again comparing electric and diesel. So we're comparing this bar and this bar, this bar and this bar, right? And so as you can see, electric is greater than diesel in among van owners. Electric is greater than diesel among hatchback owners, among sedan owners as well, but not among SUVs, minivans, but also true among trucks. So you can see we have an exception. If you look at all these different categories and you really can't find something that's always true, then you could mention the rule plus the any possible exception to the rule. So for example, I could say something like, it seems that in most car categories, the percentage of electric vehicles exceeds those that are diesel fueled. Except for, so you see, I'm establishing the rule and then I'm saying except for SUVs and minivans, where the percentage of diesel fuel cars was greater than electric cars. Do you see what I just did there? I tried to come up with a rule and immediately presented the exception coming after. But trust me, a lot of the time on the exam, they will put these obvious patterns in the data for you to identify. So it's not like the real world where you have, like lots of complex random numbers. There will usually be a pattern, and the examiners will try to make this pattern as observable and as easily identifiable as possible for you. So there's no need to really worry, am I going to be able to find a pattern or not? Even in this example that really doesn't have a lot of patterns in it, I showed you how you could describe a general pattern even though you're mentioning the exceptions within it. Okay, so what is the final key takeaway or vital piece of information that we can extract from this chart? Again, that's easy. Take a close look and you can see that certain categories on the whole tend to have larger numbers in general. This is another way of looking at that rule that I was telling you about. So let's see. For example, if you look closely, you'll see that the percentage of electric, gas, and diesel vehicles was greatest in the sedan category. That is, more people in this European country tended to own a sedan vehicle regardless of whether it was electric, gas, or diesel. In fact, there is an exception, and that is diesel, right? So there were more people owning diesel SUVs, diesel-fueled SUVs, compared to diesel-fuel sedans. So again, you could mention a general rule if there are no exceptions. So if we didn't have the diesel situation here, we could have said that the highest percentage of people in this European country owned a sedan. All right, that would have been true. But because we have this exception, we're going to have to put it this way. The highest percentage of people in this European country owned sedans, regardless of fuel category, except for diesel cars, which were more common among SUV owners. So you see, the rule is established and the exception is presented and next to it. But then if you want to go with an absolute rule, it's vans, right? So consistently, regardless of the type of fuel source, vans had the lowest percentage of owners, right? So here we could put it this way. We could say that among all these vehicle types, the smallest percentage of ownership belonged to vans, where the least amount of electric, gas, and diesel vehicles were owned. Thank you again for watching. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. If you did, please share, like, and subscribe. I'll see you all in the next lesson.